Newcastle Knights, NRL Fantasy. Scoop and I are super excited for this one. We've got, I'm reading a lot of rotating halves, question mark, mate. Can you talk us through that while we're here to begin?
Well, the Knights have attacking weapons all over the park, but they don't know really how to put it together with the same team. So they had Hastings, Gamble, they had Will Price, they have Crossland, they've got Cogger, and they kind of just threw them all around when stuff wasn't working last year. So if they settle down, I think they can do pretty well, but they need to stay there. So they finished the year with Crossland and Cogger, I think, and I think that's how they'll start this year.
Hmm.
We
Who
could see
knows?
some benefit in the outside backs as a result.
Who knows? But you got Will Price, Hastings, one other. Oh, Gamble as well. Yes, five of them. It's just too
Yep.
many. There's just too
Yep.
many. Um, Out of all of those, mate, is Price the only one that you'd maybe think about, or is Cogger on that list as well?
Cogger, who was it? Who's the who's the Knights guy on Twitter?
Oh, Barry, Tui,
Barry. Yeah,
the
Barry
GOAT.
was Barry said a couple of weeks ago that Cogger was in line for seven. I don't
Okay.
know whether that's early preseason or that's what they're planning for long term, but I've got him there for now, and I think that's how they finished the year anyway. With well, Phoenix. I went and looked at the video. Actually, they had Phoenix seven, Cogger six, but in their last two or three games, it was actually on field. Phoenix was left, Cogger was right, and Cogger was doing all the kicking. So
Mhm.
I put them there as that for now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you've got in there, he scored 41.8 points a game when starting in the halves in 2024, priced at 33.9. So that's a nice 8 points of value right there, mate.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's hard to say exactly how all the share works because he's playing with different people all the time. But if he is kicking most of the time and doing a lot as the main halfback, you're going to go up from 33.9.
Yeah, you got him there. If he's kicking 250 to 300 meters and making 25 tackles, it's pretty close to that 34 already, which is pretty fun. But then you've mentioned there about that ceiling, and yeah, I suppose he's only got ceilings in grand finals. Is that right?
That's absolutely, absolutely elite grand finals. But yeah, I don't think he's much of a runner. But I mean, if you've got that base, all you need is a try assist and a tackle break once or twice, and that's it. So, yeah, I don't think he's got insane value, but he's definitely got solid value. Like, I can't see him going below probably about 5 points of value.
Yeah, somewhere near that 40 marker, mate. It was absolutely wild how he looked at the Knights compared to how he looked when he took the reins at Panthers. It was like in games when Cleary wasn't there, and then obviously in that final as well, how influential he was. He didn't look anything like it at the Knights.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see. Uh, I'm calling it anti-Panthersitis,
Yeah.
where you drop 15 points and lose all your form. Well, not necessarily that. Like Stephen Crichton last year, I think he lost about 300k. He didn't look bad, but he suffered from the disease of not playing for the Panthers and
Yeah.
went from mid 40s to low 30s average. So I think Cogger has it in him to do better than what he's been putting out. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely, mates. And let's go to that hooking position as well. And I got cooked by Brayley as well as Lussick with our back-to-back videos of my hooking crisis. But if he used to get the start and Crossland was to be at six there and not be the backup nine, and they don't have another half, let's say, on the bench, is he someone that you could start with after finally getting through a good amount of time without injuries?
I'm actually pretty happy with Brayley, to be honest. The main risk was Crossland, as you said, and I think it keeps him away if he's in the halves. And I looked at some of their games, and there was a lot of games where there was a utility or somebody that was barely playing any game time at all. Like sometimes they'd come on and play 25, and others would be playing like 7 minutes or 11 minutes or something. So I think even if like Gamble's on the bench, I think like if you throw in Gamble 15 minutes you can go anywhere, do an okay job when you're that fresh, go in the middle, do whatever. So I've chucked Brayley at 75 minutes because he does have games sometimes where he goes off early. But I mean that's still fine. If he plays 80 most of the time, there's going to be value there at 38.3.
Oh yeah, it's not even a question, and it was why I jumped on after a couple of. He finally got back to those 80-minute games, but that will definitely be the worry because we did see when they had that half like a gamble on the bench, and that's what you've got there for the 15. He would go into the halves, and then Crossland or whoever it would be would go and play nine for that 15-20, and that's where it cooks Brayley as more of a tackle bot type of guy, that's for sure. But surely they've got to get out of that where they're shifting out their half partway through the game. Like that just seems like it doesn't seem like a good strategy for a top eight team, does it?
No, it seems like you just avoid it completely. So I'm pretty happy to say he'll play good minutes this year. From rounds 22 onwards, when he shifted back to hooker instead of interchange, he played from round 22 80, 73, 85, 70, 80, 80. So I think he'll still get very good minutes, even if it's not 80 all the time. So yeah, 75 is what I've currently got him pegged down at as an average for the year.
Yeah, and it has to be more chance that that's the case than going back to the 55-60 just because he got through without the injuries. And that was the chat. It was kind of like, oh, we're just going to try and save him, make sure his body's okay. So they must have been really worried about him last year because, yeah, I bought him and he played, what, 50 minutes or something like, oh, yeah, he's probably going to be off the bench for the rest of the year. It's like, what? So I definitely see it as more chance that it's going to be the right way this time. So I'm not completely scarred, but there are a lot of hookers in the game right now that of cheaper value and could potentially score somewhere in the 40s in the Mamas Ellises and these types of players. So he's an interesting guy. It might be a collection of having that mid-range Brayley with a cheaper guy or two, but we'll have to see how that one works out. But mate, let's move to the edge position. It was a contentious topic last year when you had Frizzell, Kaipis Paul, and Dylan Lucas fighting for two spots, and it would chop and change every week. And then you'd have Dylan Lucas come on, he'd play some edge, then they'd move him and he'd play center like they would with Beau Fermor. There's a lot going on in that one. Frizzell, the odd time played some middle. How do you see it panning out this year? You've got Frizzell going to the middle. Do you see that as a long-term strategy for them?
I think it's going to move that way. Dylan Lucas is too good to keep out, I think.
Hmm.
And Frizzell's starting to get older and he'd still do damage in the middle. He's still a very effective player. And then if somebody goes down injured, it is very easy to throw Dylan Lucas into center and to put Frizzell back on the edge. It's a very versatile team, and I think it works really well for them in that way.
Hmm. That minutes is where I find a bit of a problem there for Frizz being such an important player. I probably had him at if he's going to play middle, probably at 50. How you do that is the next question, but yeah, probably would it be hard for him to go from like a 30-minute guy to then if there was an injury in the edge back to an 80-minute edge role? I don't know how do we see it playing out, or how do we find him those minutes, and how do we find all three of them those big minutes?
Yeah, it's a little tough, but I do think that well, it happened a fair bit last year, didn't it? There was a lot of times where they would move around because of an injury, and because a lot of their players can shuffle. So we've already said Lucas can go to center, Frizzell can go to edge or middle. There's guys that can go to wing if needed, and so I think he's their break glass in case of emergency. And although he'll be set to play 35 minutes of middle most of the time, every second or third game, I reckon he probably gets an extra 20 or 30 or more even because of an injury.
Yeah, it's not the worst strategy there for sure for a guy that's over the 30 mark anyway, and they've got an absolute jet as we said with Dylan, and it's we had problems with it last year with certain guys, Connor Watson getting moved out to centers, Damien Cook being moved out to centers. Dylan can do okay in the centers, but if you were to be buying him at a 50 average, maybe with the duel, see how that one goes. If he has the center duel, then that's pretty wild. But let's just say he's edge only. Can you buy him with confidence, expecting him to be that sort of 55 guy that we know he scores that when he does play edge only?
Yeah, well, if he does start and Frizzell isn't starting, I think we can be pretty confident he'll be playing that big role. I'd say he's probably ahead of Kai Pearce-Paul in their pecking order now.
Should be. Should
And
be.
if they do, Kai Pearce-Paul might lose a couple of minutes if they do end up wanting to do something like that. So yeah,
Mm.
if you just take out that and say he's going to play 80, yeah, 55 average, be great. I think I really want to say, because of his utility value and how often he played there last year, that he'll have centre duel. He had 5 games starting centre, and there was at least 2 or 3 others where he moved there. So fingers crossed,
You
but
probably should, yeah.
Fan have been known to not.
Yeah, I think him and Bo should probably get it, to be fair.
Yeah.
The amount of times that they did get named there to start, or that might be the problem too, is like getting named on the edge and then changing in the hour before, if
Oh,
they register that as well. Will be pretty interesting. But guys, if you are interested in the private group, all the information is in the description below, so go check that out. Super exciting year 3. It's getting bigger and better, so go check that out. But mate, yeah, Dylan Lucas is gonna be a fun one. That bench, I think those minutes are fairly well set. Let's start back down at the fullback slot. The great Kalen Ponga, a 54 average last year. He was a little bit higher than that the year prior, so it could be a little bit of upside potentially there on that one. But talk us through him, mate, with his try scoring last year. I think he went for a big cold patch at the beginning of the year, and then he's got his try assist there you're mentioning as well.
yeah. It's hard to separate without going back and looking at a bunch of footage how much form versus halves partner was actually affecting his scoring because, yeah, Knights weren't doing well at the beginning of the year and Ponga wasn't doing a lot. But when he wasn't with Hastings, he was averaging nearly a try assist a game, goals went up. Knights did a lot better, but how much of that was just Hastings and how much of that was overall team form and Ponga form and things like that? I think
Mm.
he'll do better than last year. How much is the question? I've currently got him at 56, which is 2 points better than last year.
Yep. No, that makes sense. And just quickly, guys, for a team with a buy in round 4 and then all the way through until round 18. So obviously, Origin guys, it doesn't make too much of a difference. They miss 12, 15, and 18 anyway, but you're missing that round 4, which is fairly early and could be slightly frustrating. But when you're looking at a Dylan Lucas type of player, a Jaden Brayley, these types of guys, you could probably get through round 4 fairly comfortably. You might be down to sort of 19 available players for that week if you had the 1 or 2 nights, and maybe a concussion or something like that you're dealing with in round 4. So you can probably get through that. And then holding those guys, someone like Dylan Lucas, who's not going to be in Origin most likely, all the way through to round 18 for that next buy could be really cool. But I suppose the other thing, you could just buy them in round 5, right?
Yeah, if you're confident based on the first month or so that Dylan Lucas is getting 80, he's going to be this year's Owen Aitken and sit on a 50 average with a centre duel, that's a good option. So, yeah, I'm not opposed to doing that.
Yeah. And what about your goat, mate? Greg Marzhew from 2023.
Uh,
Wasn't
Mate,
as fun last year.
I just hope Kiraz doesn't have a fall off like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think you look at all the phrases, you can see how good the Knights backline is just from the fantasy scores, which isn't super common. But yeah, everybody over 40 except Greg Marzhew last year, which is mental. But yeah, only 7 tries after 22 the previous year, and I think that was
Wow.
partially a big symptom of them just chopping and changing the halves so much and ball not being able to get out to him as much. So if he can get more ball with a settled halves pairing, I think he can do better than 36. But yeah, it's hard to say, oh, yeah, he'll go back to 50 because he's a winger. It's pretty rare that a winger will get a 50 average season. Usually you get one guy who'll do that for one season and then go back to like a 40 average. Like Brian To'o is probably the best example of being able to do it a little more regularly.
Mm.
Kiraz did it last year. Greg the year before. Nofaluma used to do it 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Mm.
Yeah, it's hard to say he's going to be 45, 50 average guy, but I think he'll do better than 36.
Yeah, 36 is very, very low. But what you're saying about the halves and I think just watching their games, the clunkiness of it, and when it's clunky, it's not smooth getting out to the wings, and you don't have those three on twos. You look down that side, and it's 4 on 4, and you've got guys slightly out of position. It's the ball's getting
Yeah,
caught next to them,
yeah,
behind them, just not smooth. That's what we
yeah.
saw last year.
And then the strategy's like, oh, give it to Ponga, and he does two side steps, throws it to a back row, and they're over.
Yeah, which happened with Lucas, or they popped that little kick through a few times. I think Hastings to Lucas or Ponga through, and whereas the year before it was just flowing beautifully out the back to getting Greg 1 on 1 or just going through untouched on a regular basis, and yeah, to go 14, 15 more tries the year before it was very very clear. They'd get close to the line, they'd have a 3-on-2, Ponga would just zing it to Greg, and he'd be over. But part of that has to be to
Mm.
do with him scoring that many tries in 2023. Your scouting report's going to be on that left hand side with Ponga to Marzhew, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't think it'll take too much for it to improve because the main base stats and stats you wanted to see were still there.
Yeah.
It's just none of that attack. So 2023, he had an unhinged 8.6 tackle breaks a game. He still averaged 5.5 tackle breaks a game last year, which is one of the best. Still averaged 185 meters. Still was offloading a little bit. So I really just think it's if the attack flows, Greg Marzhew will go up.
That's one portion of it. But I do think a large portion, especially in that second half of the year when it did start to flow a little bit better for the Knights, they went right and they went right hard. It's always been Dane Gagai ball
Mm,
down that right hand side, but the last 2 years, Dom Young, and then the emergence of Fletcher Sharp last year, mate. He was scoring quads and
mm.
2 and 3 a game when Greg was getting a cold on the other side, and that's probably the big worry as well. If Fletcher's to take another step up this year, and Dane's playing as good as he was, then and if Bradman Best is missing games as well, I think that kind of hurts Greg a little bit if Bradman's out. Yeah, then they'll really go right. But talk us through Dan Gagai, made a 52 average for him last year and was absolutely incredible again, and unlikely to get into Origin this year after playing again last season.
Yeah, Dan Gagai is one of the few pure centers that you're relatively confident will be up in the elite guns every year. Like 51.8 as a center, a pure center, not a dual edge back rower or somebody who's got something else attached to them. That's elite. He tackle breaking, has great passes over to his winger. He cleaned up when Sharp was there at the back end of last year as well. I haven't got him at 51.8 because it's super hard to say, oh, he'll score better than that. But yeah, he'll still be top five centers, I reckon.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it could be a post there buy kind of when you've got a bit extra cash in the bank and team value, then you can maybe have a little punt on him. Bradman Best, mate, he just feels like a guy that you've got to get at a cheaper price and get him for the right
Mm.
month. He's a month player, isn't
Yeah,
he?
you've got to get him for he's a bit more of a super coach player, really. You get him at the time where he's going to score the 100 in fantasy for you and to be
Massive.
able to sniff it out.
Yeah. He looks incredible in those games, doesn't he? He looks like he should be able to go
Mm.
50 plus every week and looks better than Dane Gagai in these games, but Dane just is so consistent, whereas Bradman, the
Yeah,
injuries and obviously just certain games where it just happens for him. And he got a couple of tons last year, which is wild, as he said. That's for sure,
yeah,
mate. It's a fun backline. That's probably the hard thing, and we can see that with different teams like the Panthers as such that they'll pick and choose which side they go and they'll attack that side. Like at the beginning of the year, it was Isaac Tungo down that and To'o down that right hand side, and then through the back end of the year, you had guys like Paul Alamotti doing really good down the left hand side, and this feels like a team where they'll really push one side for certain games or for certain stretches of
yeah.
games, and it can be hard to pick a certain guy from a certain side, right?
Yeah, it could be that you have stretches where somebody's got a hat trick and the other's got none. A bit like the back end of last year where Sharp took everything, and I think Greg got one try, two tries in that last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they will be able to choose what's working for them and which opposition has got a weak side more often this year. Once now that they've got It's a very complete backline, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's beautiful, especially with they obviously lost Dom, and they probably took three-quarter of the year to find Fletcher and have once Ponga got back to move him to that wing. And if Greg plays that a little bit better, I think it's just a little bit off in general last year as well. Yeah, it could be tremendous, but yeah, that halves pairing and just having someone like Brayley there all year, I think will be helpful for him as well. And Leo Thompson will be there with plenty of confidence after his big deal for the doggies. I think it'll be helpful for him, but hopefully he does well. Just has a terrible PPM, doesn't he, for a fantasy guy?
Mm.
Old
Yeah,
Leo.
it's he's a good impact guy, and he's a bit of size, which the Bulldogs do need. But yeah, he's for somebody who plays 50 minutes and has just got this big contract. You'd think he'd be putting out a few more stats, but no, it's sort of what he does on the field that helps get it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the stats don't show as much of the value that he provides, and you see that when he plays for NZ as well. And Kaipi's Paul, mate, I didn't really touch on him much, but at 44.6, hardly scored a try last year. Is there some upside there, or is it probably a bit too hard to kind of take that punt on him this year?
Yeah, with Dylan Lucas probably ahead of him, it's harder to take a punt on him rather than somebody like that because there's higher risk that something will go wrong.
Mhm.
And when there's not heaps of upside and there's a lot of downsides, you just move on to somebody else.
Yeah, and the last guy on the list, mate, Adam Elliott. I talked him up in the preseason last year. He was a little bit slow, minutes were a bit weird, and then he went out and banged out a double and 95 points or something crazy. But then he kind of just had one other really good game, I think, and then just petered off with a underwhelming PPM for a guy that gets 55 minutes.
Yeah, I think he showed Horsburgh what to do and then just let it slide pretty much.
Yeah, it's a weird one, but yeah, another one of those teams, Eels and Knights back to back that have plenty of interesting fantasy options and probably at different times, right? We saw, Greg become an
Mm.
option at one point last year. Ponga will be an option from round one. Gagai definitely from early rounds. Whatever they do with the halves might come up. Brayley could be interesting as well. You could also watch the first 3 weeks of Brayley and also see how the other hookers go, and then potentially pick him up. You could go from Lucas from round one or round five. Yeah, 4, 5, 6 options that are going to be very interesting for in a team that has that terrific run of no buys from round five to round 18.
Mm.
There you go, guys. That is the Knights for this one. We'll keep banging out all of the teams. And for those that are asking in the comments, we don't know when fantasy is opening either. We're sad about it that we've got no sneak peeks, no whatever else. We're very much hoping. Obviously, every day that goes past, we're getting one day closer. And I'm just going to keep banging out some content, and hopefully, I wake up one morning and we've got the Christmas present a month late, right?
I want a nice shiny F1 fantasy setup, polished, everything new, nicely prepared for us rather than, oh, we just open it later. That would be disappointing.
Yeah, something fun would be cool. Um, but yeah, in the meantime, we've got the fantasy content, we've got the Supercoach stuff going. We've both given up a little bit on BBL, so I'm
Uh,
all in on NRL now. So excited for that. 50 days or so left until round one. Vegas, give me some fun games as well. That Panthers Sharks game is just going to be something else, isn't it?
Cracker. We had two fantastic games there to start last year, and if they show up like they did last year for the second iteration, could be an absolutely brilliant way to show America this is why we like this game.
Yeah, or it just seems, yeah, obviously they're trying to get that audience, but also it just seems like a magic round type feel. So it's just like you're just doing it because it's a great event, and yeah, brings in a bit of cash eventually as well for NRL. But those two games were they were definitely the best two games of round one, but they were some of the better games for the first half of the season, I think.
I agree. They were really, 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 really fantastic.
And at least I think it's a scary way, but a fun way to start the fantasy season as well, having the split round one. And yeah, you've got to have your full team, but it's like, oh, I'm only locking in these players and you haven't got team lists for everyone. It was scary, but it was fun at the same time last year. So I'm looking forward to that again. The chaos. There you go. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll catch you in the next one.